In the southern African country of Zambia, children from poor communities face widespread and persistent discrimination in many aspects of their lives. It all starts at school. The Patriotic Front government promised to change this by absorbing all community schools into mainstream public education system. But victory at the ballot box and real change are two different things. To date, this has not come to fruition, and many people are not convinced with this promise from government.
Community schools are here to stay. We'll change the leaders, I don't know how many times, but community schools will never change. They will be there forever.
Primary education is free in Zambia, but the initiative introduced in 2002 by government lacks proper planning and falls short on quality. Some classes in public schools hold as many as 100 pupils for one teacher. As a result of hidden costs for requirements such as uniforms, books and other school supplies, poor and vulnerable children continue to be funneled to community schools where they are taught a low-level curriculum and mostly by untrained teachers.
Below each sentence are 4 words or...
If education is a tool for breaking the cycle of poverty, this experience then leaves children paralyzed and traps generations into a cycle of poverty and hopelessness.
Because they let the room, they are very quick at that.
We have come to Kalungula Orphanage Community School to see for ourselves what goes on at this school. The school is struggling with many challenges. Yet the lack of teachers, overfilled classrooms and the scarcity of textbooks and other school supplies, none of this could stem the flow of new students.
The rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poor. So they are helping the rich instead of helping the poor here. So we are remaining poor in the villages and they are helping those who are already up. That's the only problem we are facing in our country.
John Manda, who recently completed his secondary education, is one of the volunteer teachers staffing the school. The other two are the founder of the school, Bishop Prince Msopelo, and his wife. None of the three is a qualified trained teacher. Without this learning institution, many children would not have a chance of getting an education, as the only nearby government school is some 30 kilometers away, we are told.
When we looked around, we found that the orphans were many. We said, well, the only thing that we can do as a church is to come up with a school that can be helping orphans that are failing to go to government schools. The entire structure was put up by the community through the help from some donors.
The frustration of running a school without government support is visible in the eyes of Bishop Msopelo.
All community schools are the same. The same problems you are finding here, they are the same problems you find even in Yampande. You go to Mlola, you go to where, these are the same problems. And you find somebody who gets money at the month end, he comes to shout at a volunteer, to say, you're not teaching well, you're not doing this, what? Nonsense.
But you have some inspectors from government.
We have inspectors from the government, yes. My brother, can you harvest where you haven't sown? Why do they inspect that?
Kalungula Orphanage Community School has built a reputation for being a home away from home for these children, many of whom are orphans and vulnerable. 16-year-old Oshenia Shimanika lost both parents when she was 14. Her story is made the worse because she has to look after her 4 siblings.
Uyu mvira kutatea bamai bake mvira kutatea pamwe wana papa chabe bwa mwadira so bana bwa mtenga bwa mpeka kumadha Teresa sonjo kamenza na bwa kulira so pamana kulako nje pamana bwa ndio mutenga ndio pamana bwa mutenga ndio kwambo nkhala naye timalima milisi tikalima milisi timaile kaso chabe kange tibe feteraza kutatitingaike kondrama tiriba kutatitingagule so timaisia so chabe milisi kakula manje pametimamba it could.
Oshenia and her brother are refusing to let this condition shatter their dreams.
Ku school tumapunza chabe bwino matichers kainwa ongaziko mundafya napasa nenze napasa manje chanyi fees nje nakangache so futi ndipe nabweza grade 7 kuti kapena madezi nangu tizapeza ubwino tikalima ku milisi so nikasiza school ngapezi kati nangu na nankhala ku president nangu minister vija so ndifuna nkawatandize ngatwa na vuto lyonse wangabwere kulini na watandiza vili vonse cheviza funa.
The increasing inequality between the rich and the poor is evident even in education. While the sons and daughters of politicians and other well-off Zambians go to better schools, the poor children continue to rely on these makeshift learning institutions as their schools. The situation is getting worse even before it can improve.
Pano pa skulu timapunzira mushe mani tiche na mavuto chitati malata kuskulu kwatu kulibe and futi ma parents wena batu sibasebenza so apatipimba kumtifakire kuchabe malata government na kuja mutishikire kwa pampa machuka chusi hapa stima lemba bwino sometimes nikasiza school nifanya kankale engineer kali kuno community kwatu kuno na manyumba si ali bwino so nifanya nikatunge kwa manyumba na kufaka na malaiti monsi.
Bishop Msopelo volunteers to take us to another school in the far-flung area where he says the situation is much worse. After a 1.5-hour drive on a bumpy and dusty road, this is what we find. The children have knocked off, but we are lucky to find members of the Parents-Teachers Committee winding up their meeting. They agree to meet us.
School wamene tinayambira tinayangana monga wamene tilili ku site kuno tipatali na schools mu malo yamene ano ero futi tinayangana na kubana kuti aba bana sibangakwanise kwenda mitunda itali already pano pamene tilili pakati kuti tifike ku school kwinangu timankhala kuyenda mtunda wa utali so tinankhala pansi monga bantu bamumunzi tinaganiza kuti tingayambe ka school kuti bana bang'ono baja bazibwera kuti bazibako zo za ku school kuti olo baje bakafika pa msingo kuti bakula bakwanirise kuyenda mu school amutali. Namba ya bana amene tili nawo pano tinali na namba ya bwino poyamba tinali kukwanira 200 something bana amene pano manje chikwa cha ma distance amene achoka mu utali bana venango babwerera kumbuyo then namba amene tili nawo pakali pano ni 150 bamene bakwanirisa kufika pa school niponso nawo futi siku tini bamu area yamene ino abamayenda kuti bafike pano koma ni pa center chabe kuti bamakwanirisa.
The chairperson of the Parents-Teachers Committee says they are working very hard to ensure that their children are not left off the education hook. The situation about teachers is similar to that at Kalungula.
Manje ma teachers anyway tima nkala pamozi timaruisha paka tawafikisa paka ngono kamene kuti nawo bakondwera but ni bantu bamene banazipereka chabe kuti bangapunsize kopanda malipiro ali onse.
In theory, there is universal access to Zambia's education system, but access is limited by the underfunding of schools and the lack of teachers and school supplies in government schools. We put a question to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education as to when the government is going to take over community schools or at least provide teachers to these schools. This was the response from the government. But the questions are not going away. People want to know why we have not made much progress in ensuring that every child gets a decent education.
The government has been saying that it has government grants which is being given to schools. My brother, to tell you the truth, most of them have been receiving 300,000. Where can we go with 300,000?
There are suggestions too coming from experts as to what can be done to improve the conditions in community schools.
Establish a good policy framework as well as a legal framework, but all of it ensuring the financial support for the schools. I would wholeheartedly support a movement within Zambia, which will take a long time, that all schools become community schools because of the manifest advantages. They are the community, and the community has the responsibility and the right to educate and teach its own children.
To use an old cliche, Zambia is a country that was born with a copper spoon. It is a country which is endowed with rich mineral resources, and copper remains the country's wealth. But experts say the problem lies in the way proceeds from the mineral resources are distributed and shared.
When copper prices boom and demand is created, it does not filter through to rural Zambia, and 80% of the population does not benefit from a copper boom. The only way to benefit the rural population and the large majority of people who live in rural Zambia, and to change how Zambia grows, one has to change the basic structure of this economy. And I know what I'm saying is not new. What did we do wrong? Why is it that this economy, which was so wealthy in the 60s and the 70s, why did we let this happen?
The other problem is placed on corruption during the movement for multi-party democracy's 20-year-old rule. The second Republican president, late Frederick Chiluba's rule, was marred by corruption allegations. He was sued by the Zambian state in the London High Court and was subsequently found guilty of corruption of around $46 million. The graphic example of his corruption involved payment to top European designers for his high-heeled shoes and stylish suits. The PF government promised to register this case in the Zambian courts, but to date nothing has been done. The cost of the country's corruption by high-ranking government officials is seen on how the education sector has suffered a serious setback in infrastructure development and the lack of adequate teachers.
We can hear of this 50 million, 50 billion, whatever being misused. But one thing that you should bear with me is that a poor man's voice is never heard. A rich man can cough and everybody will hear.
Since 2002, primary education is free in the country, but the lack of space in government schools leaves many children out of school.
The number that we are going to add, we given these numbers to add. Those numbers.
Mr. Mwale, the head teacher at Linda Community School, says the school was started by a Catholic nun who was working in the area after seeing the increasing number of orphans whose parents were dying of HIV/AIDS-related illnesses. The school has made tremendous contribution to the education of many children who could have otherwise missed out.
You might be sad to learn that there's no government school in Linda, there's no government clinic, and it was way back in 1994 when a Catholic nun, Sister Lonia, by then, started a hospice, a Chiranga hospice, when the HIV issue was mushrooming. And what puzzled her was looking at the number of children that were nursing their sick parents or guardians. And she wondered whether they were going to school, and she decided to take a leave to come and see what this compound was all about. And she was saddened to learn that there was no school in this community. And she initiated a community school to be started here in Linda. That was in 1994. And just that year, she managed to recruit 150 students. 90 were girls and 60 were boys. From 90 girls, this year we have 800 girls and 791 boys. The problem is on the teachers' issue, which I think the government can really look into that by seconding or sending teachers here, but being on their payroll. Of all these 16 teachers, there's not a single teacher that is on government payroll. And we have the community. They make contributions towards the children, but they also don't manage, because as I said, most of them are vulnerable. One importance is we have 1,591. Without this school, we are talking of 1,591 out of school. And these students that are in this community, particularly this school, are Zambians and orphaned and vulnerable.
The challenges faced by community schools are illustrative of Zambia's failure to provide education for all its citizens. Although statistics giving the actual number of community schools are hard to come by, there is hardly any area in the country without a community school. The idea of community schools started in the early 1990s, when the number of children from vulnerable and poverty-stricken communities was increasing because their parents were dying from AIDS. The government schools simply had no place to take in extra children. In some cases, community schools started because the nearest government school would be hundreds of kilometers away. Community schools are an initiative of a variety of groups, non-profit organizations, churches, or even parents in a home. Although community schools are not part of the mainstream government education system, they account for 20% of enrollments in primary schools according to official government sources. The schools themselves range from makeshift classrooms to passable schools, but they all have something in common: a determined community, children hungry for an education, and selfless, voluntary and untrained teachers, usually from the same community. This is what we found when we made a stopover at another community school in the capital city, Lusaka. Esnat Kawechali was a student here after completing her secondary education. She is here to give back to her former school.
I completed in 2008. After I finished, I came back to my school here at Chanda Open Community School to help my fellow friends.
Community schools have provided a lifeline for many children who would have otherwise missed out on education. Children as old as 10 or 12 are enrolling for the first time in these schools.
Pamene nzo mu street life yenzo kwadi ero futi nenzo ganga tya inenso che kulibe kwa menza kaendapo kwinango sinenzo opunzira banenzo ngache madezo za peza limbina na tako pisweki wanipasa 500 nagula kuchokudya ndio mwana bwana ngira team 2 grade 5, so I'm very happy.
The success of community schools is a tribute to the determination of people like Esnat, who have given all their time to help others in needy situations.
I want to give back what my teachers taught me at Chanda Open Community School so that other pupils can also become teachers one day.
The actual number of community schools in Zambia is not clear, but according to the Education Ministry, the number is well over 3,000.
Between two government schools, villages see that their children are struggling to go to the nearest school at 7-kilometer point. They decide, let's put a school here. So they help to reduce distances. There's no uniform required, no levies, no age limit. They belong to the community. These are community schools. They belong to the community. They are integrated in the community. They can be more responsive to the needs and concerns of the community. Community schools are responsive. They can be. Even if you wanted to modify the curriculum in those schools to suit the community in which they find themselves, they can very easily do it because they are there. They belong there.